thing that I have been thinking about recently is this kind of paradox between happiness and progression in society. Because today we live in an age where we believe that happiness is, the most important thing in life. At one time, it said that we should, do our duties, we should care about the nation, we should follow what God says, these things. And I believe that this created strong nations when people felt an obligation to make the nation strong. That creates strong nation. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Same thing why a corporation becomes successful if the people working there believe that it's a good thing to make the corporation strong. So in a nation, in order to make a nation or a society strong, it's a good thing if the people who live there believe in making society strong. It seems logical. So if you have a corporation and everyone who works there then decides that their primary focus is themselves, basically making themselves happy. They want to have as much vacation as possible, they want to work as little as possible, they want to make money and get out, or they're just focused on their own feelings of what makes them happy for the moment and tries to work as little as possible. Of course, this is not good for the company, I would say. A company, I myself, I'm running a small company, a business, and just as every person who's running a business wants to have people working there caring about the business. I'd even say that's the one most important thing, that somebody cares about what they're doing and want to do a good job at what they're doing. To me, that's just like the number one prime criteria if I'm hiring somebody. It is not intelligence, it is not skill, because skill can be learned. But it's the fact that somebody cares about the company, basically. So if they make a mistake and you tell them, then they say, okay, you know what, I'm going to try and do better because I want to do a good job. Not because they want to appease me or suck up to me or something, but because I want to do a good job and be good for the business. And that just helps in every possible aspect when you know that somebody wants to make the company succeed as much as you do, because then you know that they're going to go that little extra distance. They're going to maybe send an extra email to some customer to ensure that the customer feels satisfied, instead of just saying, well, my shift is over now, I'm going home, you can't tell me what to do. So this is one of those basics that anyone who has a company knows this, but because of, there's always been a strong workers movement that wants to say that, the employers are sort of trying to take advantage of the workers, and so the employers are sort of mean or driven by wanting to take advantage of people, and so kind of encouraging workers to only work as much as they have to. Now, I'm not gonna say that this is wrong, or I've worked for a long time, and I didn't always care about the business, but I'm just saying that it just helps. Say if you're running a restaurant, you kind of want the people working there to ensure that customers are happy, that the tables are cleaned. You don't want to constantly sort of tell them that it's a good thing for a business to have the tables clean. Because most people working at a business are going to say, that's not my job, that's his job, I don't want to do his job. But of course, if you have a business where people feel motivated to give the best effort they can to make the business succeed, then you're going to have more likely to have a successful business. Okay, it might seem logical, right? So to me, what is true in the small is true in the big, and the other way around. What is true in the big is true in the small. So, to make a company or a society good, the people, the citizens, should feel some sort of common goal. They should feel a wish to make society better, and according to various studies, the generation that felt this the most in in history, or in American history, in Western history, was the what was they, the baby boomers or something, the ones who were born, I think, in 1930s or 1940s maybe. No, I think 1930s, and because they had lived through or suffered through the Depression and World War II, and they sort of came to age right after that. And there was a great optimism and a great sense that we're all in this together, we can do something. And studies have shown that they kind of made America great, because they had high trust for one another, they cared about other people, they were the most giving people, the ones who give the most to charity, the ones who are most active in unions or other such organizations that make society better. And ever since their generation, the sort of the interest for helping society has declined, has been on decline. And it should be mentioned, I didn't know this either, but before this baby boomer generation, or I think maybe it's called the Great Generation, the Great Generation. Before the Great Generation, there was also a decline in a sort of a common sense, sort of common spirit in America. Because so much immigrants coming into America in the 1890s, 1900, 1910s, that there were many conflicts. But then this sort of came together due to depression and war, and people felt the solidarity. That's why they are called the Great Generation, because they sort of created the great spirit of America and built all these institutions and charities. So and I would say, I think some scientists say that having, say, a common school is a good way to make people feel united, like a public common school where everybody goes. A religion, this is why they had this Pledge of Allegiance in America. I think it was created in the 1920s to make people feel that they're united in something. It really helps to try and do whatever you can to unite people in a country, or in a corporation for that matter. If you have a corporation and one side feels that, you know, they're against the other side of the corporation and they're stealing each other's resources, that's a very toxic environment. And I think that's the same thing in a country. So you find that many in the sort of the schoolings back in those days, there was a strong focus not on making kids feel happy all the time, but on trying to teach them the values that is necessary for a good society. You find this a lot in this early schooling era in the 1800s or early 1900s in the Western society, in America, in Europe, in other countries. So the teachers were not always nice to kids, because that wasn't the focus, that people should be happy all the time. If you look today, that has become a focus, that everyone should be happy all the time, and that we have decided that this is some magical rule, that people should be happy all the time, and that's going to fix things. And even if you look at, say, the Swedish, the results in this international PISA study, where they show that Sweden is declining in the ratings of how much Swedish students actually know, and yet we have these experts in Sweden saying, well, maybe our students don't know that much about things you can test, but they're good at like other values, such as caring about how everyone is equal and democratic values and enjoying their time in school. So we're good at that, right? That's the most important thing. It's what they say. And this kind of goes back to the idea, is it the nation that creates good citizens, or is it citizens that create good nations? And here I believe we can learn from history that whenever you have a society where everybody does what they feel like in order to be happy, history tells us that this does not create a good, strong society. For one thing, at least historically, you needed to have soldiers prepared to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the country. You might say we don't need that as much these days. You could say that right now at least. But that can change, and there are different ways of sacrificing oneself. Secondly, what makes a person happy isn't necessarily what makes a society strong. That you might think that that's unfair or unfortunate, but take me. You know, I'm smart. I could have become an engineer. A good society, a strong society, needs engineers. It needs people who can create products that can be exported. That's how wealth is created in a nation. That's how big corporations are created these days, by creating wealth, creating products, creating companies. But what happened was that nobody kind of told me that it's a good thing to become an engineer. Nobody, everyone is like saying these days, do what you feel like. So I'm doing what I feel like. I'm selling video games, and I'm doing YouTube clips, and I don't know, playing around, I guess. That's good for me. I'm very happy. Can't complain. But you can't have a nation of people selling video games. You can't have a nation of cab drivers or of people running small stores or kebab places. I'm sure they're going to feel very happy selling kebab, but if that made a nation rich, then Syria or something would be the richest country in the world, or Iraq. So that's kind of the reality of creating a rich country, or for that matter, a wealthy civilization. These things, as I see it, don't create themselves. They're not like some natural thing that evolve naturally everywhere. And that is, I think, where this progressive Western civilization is right now moving in the wrong direction. Because we know what makes a nation strong, and if we strive towards that, we can make a nation strong. If we don't do it, the nation will become weak. Another ironic factor is having kids. Having a lot of kids in a Western society is more of a liability. If people have a choice between having lots of kids or not having lots of kids, they will prefer not having lots of kids. And from what I've read, I'm right now reading about the Roman Empire, where they say that the birth rates declined, especially in the 1st century before Jesus, and I think, or maybe the 2nd century after. And it started in the upper classes and then moved down. And this is something that we are seeing in the Western world, and that nobody has a good solution to how to fix it. And one reason for this is because people say, I want to be happy. And that they feel that their life is the purpose of their life is to be happy. At one time, people said, happy you can be in the afterlife. Now it's time, in this life we need to work, we need to strive, we need to, and that's also why it might be a good thing for a society to have a constant sort of unhappiness, or people feeling unfulfilled. If people are fulfilled, why would they do anything? So right now people are like, why should I have kids? I don't want to have kids. And you can't tell them anything else if they have decided that the purpose of their life is to make themselves happy. If a person has a religion, they believe that the purpose of their life is to have kids, as Islam says, for example. I don't know about Catholics, they used to have a lot of kids in Catholicism, but even in Catholic countries the birth rates are going down. Ironically, even in a country such as Iran or Turkey have actually lower birth rates than 2. And the irony is that only sort of unfulfilled or unhappy people seem to strive to make society better. Because if you're happy about everything, why bother? Why work? And I can see this with myself and, say, my father. My father grew up in a sort of utopian Sweden. He was born in 1952, so he grew up mainly in the 60s and 70s. And society at that time was kind of like perfect. It was idyllic. You grew up in a family, a lot of people had their mothers at home who would take care of them. And everything was sort of set up for them. And they're like, okay, I'm here. Everything seems to be great. I'm having best child protection ever. We're having materially better than any other nation. There was no poverty. There was universal health care, all these things. But then if I look at my father, he's like terrified of everything that could sort of shake his world. You know, these people can't deal with they've never had any real problems in a way. So the only thing that they're focused on is trying to just maintain safety. You know, don't shake my boat. And this is kind of why Swedish people are also so anxious about things. They're afraid of saying their opinion. They're like, oh, I don't want to upset someone. And you can feel this a lot when you have these environments where everything seems perfect, like small town mentality or suburban mentality, maybe it's called. Everyone is afraid of shaking the boat, of doing anything that could result in negative reaction, because they just want to maintain this greatness that they have. Ironically, if you try to maintain greatness, you actually become unhappy because you don't have any real purpose. It's like you're trying. It's like if you have like a flower and the only thing you do is trying to make these flowers stand upright or something. And every day that it's not growing. It's just you're trying to prevent decay. That's the only thing you're doing. Instead of growing anything, you're just trying to prevent decay, and that can be very unfulfilling. And it was very depressing for me growing up with such a father, or in a way such a mother. Like my father, he was terrified of me getting cavities in my teeth. He would scream if I and I kept it. Did you have it in your permanent teeth? They are permanent. You can't fix them. I wasn't allowed to read if there was any dim light, because like, you can ruin your eyes. And you need glasses for the rest of your life. And it was like, oh no. So I grew up in this extremely neurotic world, which I think happens when people try too much to reach for perfect safety.